up, everybody? Matty Amendola here at my studio at 825 Records, and I'm stoked to be back with SonicScoop for this new installment of Making the Mix.
Gotta look right, see heavy blue light, a better man, make sure I act right, no fighting tonight, all I hear is blah, 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 blah.
Throughout the week, I'm going to be breaking down a mix for a song called Blah 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 by Juliana Wilson. This song was essentially produced and mixed simultaneously, so if you're not a mixer and you're just a musician or a producer, I think you'll benefit equally from these videos. In each video, we're going to break down every single track in the entire mix, but today I want to give you an overview. I want to show you what my template looks like in Logic, we can hear what we're working with, and ultimately how I got from the demo stage to where we are today. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so first things first, hit pause, go to www.julianawilson.com or click the SoundCloud link in the description below and listen to the full mastered mix. Just a side note, Juliana is 13 years old and we recorded this song when she was 11. So if we're going to take a moment of silence to feel bad about ourselves, now would be the time. So for this first video, I want to discuss the production of this song, how it began and how it got to where it is. I got a phone call a few years ago from a pretty big corporate client and they said, hey, we need original music for a TV commercial overseas yesterday. Can you get it to us? So probably within 6 hours or something like that, wrote a track, sent it out, got paid, it was done. It kept coming back to me as being a song that could be something else. I thought it could be cooler. And from day one, the client wanted, the only vocal they wanted aside from pads were nah, 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 or hey, 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 something very universal. When I did land on nah, 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 and the way it was tracked, I instantly heard blah, blah, blah. And I called a few songwriting buddies, 3 to be exact, and it wasn't really becoming the song I thought that it could be. Not until I sent it to my favorite Canadian songwriter, Helen Austin, who gave it everything that it needed, everything that I couldn't bring to the table. But let's listen to the original track that was used for that client for their commercial. So pretty cool for a corporate commercial. A little corny by design. But again, it had a vibe that was intriguing to me. Let's listen to it one more time so we never have to listen to it again. But I want you to pay attention to some very specific things because this was the basis of how blah 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 in its current form came about. Listen to the intro section, which was considered the verse, right? It's a pretty cool bass tone, really thin, kind of unique. Simple backbeat on the drums. And then percussion-wise, we have these knocks. Cool. That then goes into me trying to be the Beatles again. Nice little vocal pad, 3-part harmony with some sound effects, some harp, stuff like that. And then we launch into this chorus that is just huge, full of energy. There's a lot of synth action going on. So let's pay attention to those very specific elements as we listen to this demo for the last time ever. All right, from a song perspective, the structure is there. The chords are cool. There's a lot of cool parts going on. But when we're talking about making a record, especially a pop record for a 13-year-old badass, this ain't gonna cut it. So, what are the things that I liked from the demo that I wanted to keep, and what are the things that were just not gonna work stylistically? So, let's mute this and never look at it ever again. So, the first thing that I knew wasn't gonna work was just this kind of lazy Charlie Watts kind of backbeat with this thin bass, right? It was a cool vibe, but it wasn't going to do the trick. This, though, seemed to work and seemed to give it energy and a percussiveness that moved everything. And this is just the bass. So that gave me my inspiration initially. All right, we also kept all of the same melody guitars from the original track, and those sounded like this. From there, the original demo had, as I said, just that simple backbeat. I wanted something a lot cooler. So we've got a bunch of drums in here. And I can't wait till we talk about just the drums because there's some really cool stuff happening. But as a whole, we have some reverse drums, we have a soft 808 kick, a kick with some delay, another snare, a big kick, some lo-fi hits, lo-fi effects, and now the verse started sounding like this. All right, so now we got a vibe going, and now this is starting to feel like it can work on Juliana's record. On top of that, we had some swells. So we have them track stacked, which we are going to talk about. And these swells are made up of three things: organ, piano, and synth, and they're very similar to the swells that were in the original demo. Okay, from there, now that we have a little bit of top-end information going on, and I'm leaving all the room in the world for the vocal. Pop song mixing 101, right? There was me faking the Beatles. My ego wanted to keep that in the song. So I took it, I affected it, and I made it this thing that wouldn't disrupt the lead vocal, and I pretty much made it feel like something that someone wouldn't even be able to tell, oh, that's Matty singing, or that's anyone singing at all. Here's what that sounds like. All right, now for the chorus, there were a few things in the original chorus that I absolutely loved. The synths were not one of them. I was not crazy about the synths, but I did love this 12-string guitar. So let's check out this 12-string guitar. We also took in all of our pianos. I added live bass. We brought in our percussion, which was a tambourine and a shaker. And we included our harp and our vibes, which were our colors that we were using in the demo. Now, like any good pop record should, I knew this chorus needed to punch people in the face when it kicked in. And the 12-string guitar kind of reminded me a little bit of Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. So what better than to make believe I'm John Bonham now for a second and throw in some gigantic live drums. Big difference from the original. I hope you have it in your head, because I took out all the things I hated and brought in all the things that it needed to be what it is. The full chorus with vocal ended up being this.
I gotta dress right, too baggy, too tight. All I hear is blah, blah, blah. A bit of makeup, a bit of good luck. All I hear is blah, blah, blah.
And sorry, hate to do this to you, but let's just make sure we remember what the corny demo sounded like. From that to this.
I gotta dress right, too baggy, too tight. All I hear is blah, blah, blah. A bit of makeup, a bit of good luck. All I hear is blah, blah, blah.
I think it's killer. Hope you do too. So, before we move on to anything else, because in every subsequent video from here on, I'm going to talk about every single thing going on in this mix, and we have 77 tracks, which is not that much, but it's also not a small session. There's a lot of really cool effects going on. Let me break down the session for you the way I have it templated out, so when you're watching these videos, you know exactly what's happening at all times. So let's start with the output, my 2-bus right here, and we're going to get into why I'm doing these things. But we have a chain here, we have a FabFilter Pro Q2, a virtual mix rack, the UAD Manley, and then we have hardware. Yes, all the shiny things you see in front of me are not just for show. So we're going to also talk about incorporating outboard into an in-the-box mix. In our arrange window here, you see I have a track stack called Effects Bus, and this is where I have most of my core effects. So I have my EMT plate, my Lexicon Verb, my Valhalla Vintage Verb, an H delay, a stereo delay. The reason I like putting them on my arrange window are because if I'm sending a lot of sources out to these specific verbs and delays, I want them to be very visible, number one, but number two, I also want to use them, I want to visualize them like tracks. That way it keeps my mind in automation mode, right? At all times. Nothing's ever kind of just chilling. You know, I want to go in and give it some movement when it gets in there. So that's why I keep my effects bus like that right at the top of my session. All right, moving on down. If you know how I mix, this will seem very familiar. I have my live drums right at the top in red. When we get to our drum video, we will talk about all the cores, the core elements of the kit, and how we got the drums to sound like they did before we bounced it to a stereo file. Underneath that, I have another set of live drums, except these are in reverse, and I cannot wait to show you that. Moving on from here, we have some electronic kicks and elements. Those are in orange. A delayed kick, an 808 snare, some big kicks, lo-fi snare hits, lo-fi snare effects, big toms, and then we move on to our percussion, tambourine in a lighter shade of orange, shaker, and then our bass. So our bass is brown. It's just a color palette that I like. Every mix gets the same color. We have 3 bass tracks on this song. We have a reamped synth bass, a live bass, and a distorted bass. Then we move on to piano, which is in this greenish blue color. Chorus piano, and then we have a piano low, piano high, and those are all subbed out to a bus called hard piano. We have another track stack. I think Logic 10 had just come out when I was mixing this song, so there are track stacks everywhere. I'm actually using them as folder stacks, pretty much because when I'm, I try to keep everything as organized as possible. When I'm working on a vocal, I don't need to be looking at 7 guitars, so I click this little triangle, bam. I know where my guitars are, they're still there, except I don't have to look at them. But in this guitar stack, we have our 12-string guitar. Let's see some waveform action, there we go. We have our melody guitar, left, melody guitar right, and then a melody guitar right, a little off center. These are in blue. We also have an orange left, which I can only assume is pretty distorted. An orange right. Now we have our colors. We have our harp sample, our vibes, and a choir. From here we have a track stack of swells. Now, the reason why I'm using a track stack here is to use 3 elements to make one sound. So in this case, it was backwards organ, backwards piano, and a backwards synth. We then move on to vocals, which I always color some form of purple or pink. Matty BG Vox. That's me, dark purple. Right here, we have crowd FX, which is a really cool thing I threw in to kind of help the transition between going into each chorus, so we'll get to that. And then I have my Vox stack. So in my Vox stack, we have our lead vocal, which is being run through a distressor. Once again, when we start talking about outboard and how I'm using it, I will go over all the settings of my distressor and why they end up on every vocal track I mix. Under lead Vox, we have Glitch, which is a really cool plugin that I had found when I was mixing this song that does what it says, except in a really cool way, so we'll go over that. Lead Vox 2, which is usually my second distressor. I like putting the chorus and the bridge on my lead Vox 2 because I almost always will compress and EQ those slightly differently than my verse vocals. And instead of doing all that in automation, that's when I do use the beauty of digital and just make another track. Underneath that, we got a lead Vox double, some stereo vocals, vocal left, vocal right, harmony, harmony 2. And then we have our blah, blah, blah hook. So these are 12 tracks of me, Juliana, her mom, and my friend Danny Stoddard, all screaming blah, blah, blah at the top of our lungs. So that is how the session is laid out. We are going to start in the next video breaking down every single thing and every single thing that I use to make this mix.
Blah, blah, blah.